There are flashes of memories from my earliest parts of my childhood. Not many really come to mind, but one that I can pinpoint was apparently during a time when I was 3 years old, crawling into my dad's room, the only light coming from the tube of the TV, and seeing these characters move across the battlefield, not sure really what I was watching. Fast forward a few years later, and being an avid player of the hand-me-down PlayStation 1 with games like Ape Escape, Tomba 2, Crash Bandicoot 2, Toy Story 2, and Spyro, my dad handed me what PS1 games he had left after he decided to dedicate his time to his PS2. He handed me what I remember being Star Wars Jedi Power Battle and Final Fantasy Tactics. I immediately went back to playing my platformers and didn't really give it a second look. I was stupid. And I really didn't decide to play it until middle school, I think. And this became the first, and up until recently, the only Final Fantasy game I have ever completed. I don't count that game, since it plays itself, and my buddy made me play that back in high school. But Tactics was always a game that I would pick up, play for a bit, grind for a few hours, but never really played the story mode, as I will get into later. So let's get the technical jargon out of the way. Final Fantasy Tactics came out in 1997 in Japan and 1998 in America, and was a 3D tactical turn-based RPG. The game was later ported to the PSP in 2007, and then the PSP version was ported to iOS in 2011, and the Android in 2013 in Japan, and not until 2015 everywhere else, where the PSP version was an up-to-date version with cutscenes, smooth-looking graphics, extra job classes, better translation, new playable characters from other Final Fantasy titles such as Balthier from Final Fantasy XII and Lucio Clemens from Final Fantasy Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift. The games take place in the Kingdom of Ivalice, where multiple other Square properties take place, such as Final Fantasy XII and Vagrant Story. And while I never played any of those games, it was cool to see extra unlockable characters, including the returning Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. And this version of the game is the one I will actually am more familiar with for a while, because after Birth by Sleep came out, I was looking for games to support my little silver brick, and while I did buy the 2 Sonic Rival games on that thing before even having a PSP, and while those were not the best percentages I had on it, one of the games I played a lot in high school was obviously Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, the other was Final Fantasy Tactics: The War of Lions. One of the things that pulled me into this game was the ability to name the extra characters in the game, and I've always been a sucker for that in any game. I know some people prefer to have characters with story and have good character growth, and while I do enjoy that, I also love the self-inserts, as well as adding more than just the main character makes me have more attached to a virtual avatar, watching my friend die than whoever Ryan is. For this review, I'll be mainly playing the PS1 version, since it's the same one I had looked at almost 22 years ago, and I'll be giving the PSP some attention. Since I had always played this game over and over because of the game's replay value and randomly generated battles, I decided to make this playthrough a challenge run for myself in a way, and not use the story characters in my main party, with the exception of story requirements. So the main character, Ramza, will represent myself, and for my friends, I asked them what classes they'd like to play as, and made them their respected run. So along for my journey is Andre the Monk, Tyler the Dragoon, Cameron the White Mage, and Ali the Ninja. So let's go ahead and get caught up in the war with Final Fantasy Tactics. So the game takes place in the Kingdom of Ivalice, and for many years they lived in peace with the neighboring country of Ordalia. But like most stories about war, it all starts with the death of a king. Ordalia's king gone with no heir, Ivalice's king tries to take the throne and cause what would be known as the 50-Year War. The war was costly to both sides, but hurt Ivalice the most, and the war ended up with a truce. Because of this, Ivalice was unable to pay the multiple royal families that helped supporting the war, creating a massive power vacuum effect, and left a few powerful royal families that end up in control of most of the kingdom. On top of all of that, the Church of Galabados, a religious organization that worships a divine figure, is starting to make some headway. And if a church is a prominent point in a story in a JRPG, you know that some shady is about to happen. Well, as luck would have it, Ivalice's king Amdoria has died without an heir to the Ivalice throne, so 2 royal families, called the White and Black Lions respectively, look to play puppet master in the new would-be heir of Ivalice, the king's half-sister Ovelia, who the king adopted as his daughter. Just gonna skip that little keeping in the family bit. This would be called the War of Lions. This is more or less told to us in the beginning of the game by a scholar named Arzalam Durai, a descendant of one of the main characters, telling us the player that 500 years ago, when this all takes place, that history's hero Delita was not really the hero, but our character. We play as Ramza Belv, who was hired to protect the would-be queen. History forgot about him and everything that truly happened were scribed in the Durai papers that the scholar tells us. The church branded Ramza a heretic, and thus his story was removed from history. Ramza and Delita were childhood friends and candidates of the Northern Sky. Ramza, the third son of the House of Bellevue, while Delita was a commoner working in the house with his sister Tetra, who were treated with the same respect as nobles in the house. Ramza and Delita became friends while studying at the academy in Garland. Because of the power vacuum from the 50 Years' War, a group of unpaid soldiers known as the Death Corps, or Corpse Brigade, caused an uprising in Galloween, Ramza's home territory. When the Corps attacked, Garland, the students of the academy, were sent to fight them. Delita and Ramza led the group to victory and head back home to Egros Castle, home to the Bellevue family. On the way back, they run across many more Corpse Brigade forces attacking a squire. They unfortunately rescue the hat, Argrath, who was kidnapped and blah blah, screw this guy, you'll see why. They bring the butt munch to Ramza's eldest half-brother, Dysadarg, co-ruler of the house, along with Dysadarg, full brother Zalbag. Since the death of their father, Barbaneth, even though Argath is a total knob, Dysadarg says he will do what he can and tells Ramza to stay in the castle. Ramza takes the time to meet with his full-blooded younger sister, Alma. Zalbag also drops a hint to Ramza where the Marquise is and suggests that he go rescue him. Ramza's group heads to the merchant city of Dorter, where they spot the Corpse Brigade's leader, Wygrath, but the brigade halts their pursuits. Argath captures the enemy leader and beats him up until he reveals the Marquis' location. Then they travel to the Sand Rat Sitch, where they find Wygrath killing his own officer, which will continue to be a trend of betrayal and killing people to take a position. Wygrath says he objects to the dishonorable tactic of kidnapping and offers to trade the Marquis' life for his own, and Ramza agrees. With Elmdor safe, Ramza returns to Egros to find an angry Dysadarg. Elmdor was a supporter of the Order of the Southern Sky, and Dysadarg was pulling Gustav's strings to knock off a political foe. The two friends watch the sun set, while Ramza's party moves to attack a Corpse Brigade group led by Wygrath's sister, Miloweda Foles. A brigade force led by Gragorith Levingen, God, why are these names so wordy? Whatever, strikes Egros Castle, injuring Dysadarg and almost taking Alma hostage. When Zalbag rescues his sister, Gragorith grabs Alma's low-born friend Tetra instead, thinking she is noble-born. Dysadarg promises not to attack the brigade while they're holding Tetra, but Argath, never a friend to the peasant class, expresses his disapproval, causing an argument with Delita. Ramza sided with his childhood friend and tells Argath to go f*** off. Ramza and Delita lead to rescue Tetra and share a moment watching the sunset over Madalis Plains. Looking for Delita's sister, they come upon Melueda again. Though they do not see her as an enemy, she refuses to back down and they are forced to kill her. They find Wygrath's group holding Tetra in a windmill in Fovam Wind Flats. Wygrath wants to free her, but is forced to go out to fight Ramza with his chocobo, Boko, so his allies can escape. He's beaten and flees, abandoning his revolution to its inevitable defeat. Gragorith, fearing for his life, steals away Tetra and makes for Zykadin's fortress, with Ramza groups following. Despite Dysadarg's promise not to attack, Zalbag leads an assault on the fort and orders his new hat Agarath to shoot at Gragorith, who is holding Tetra at knife point. Agarath does so without hesitation and mortally wounds both of them. Seeing this, Delita attacks the douchebag with Ramza's aid. They kill their old ally and betray the Order of the Northern Sky. But Gragorith has filled the fort with gunpowder and sets it alight. Ramza thinks Delita is killed in the explosion and bans the Order and his family to become a sellsword. A year later, Ramza, who cast aside his nobility and joined a mercenary group, comes to the Orbone Monastery with the rest of the group led by Gafgarin. The church is where the soon-to-be queen is being held, when it is attacked by 7 Northern Sky Knights disguised as the southern troops. Gafgarin groups who was hired to protect the princess help fight them off, but during the struggle, Delita slips in and kidnaps the princess. Agris Oaks, the princess's bodyguard, joins Ramza and helps a hunting down with Delita. Ramza is shocked that his friend is still alive. Not understanding what his former friend planned is with all of this, he then informs the group about his story, which is actually where the game begins and thus starts the second chapter. I'm going to leave it there for right now, just because this is where the game starts here, when you boot the game up, and I think the story has some pretty awesome moments that you should experience for yourself, and this game does have a lot of betrayal, and it's a pretty engaging story, really. That isn't a typical romance story about saving the princess. I mean, there's a princess and all, but you aren't the romantic lead for that, and even then, The point being is that this game does an excellent job of introducing the layouts right at the beginning. I know that back then this wasn't the first board-style tactical RPG, and those are still going strong, especially if you're playing the Fire Emblem series, but this was my gateway, I suppose, to a more traditional sense into the Final Fantasy series. This was the first one I played, and while I was aware of the classes of the other Final Fantasy characters from passing with other forms of media online as well as friends, but what was really cool about this game was two things. One, the ability to level up in a job and working into another job that will unlock another job that you could acquire as soon as the first random encounter happens, because the random encounter scales with your average player level. So there's no weak enemies to waste your time on, so you can have this amazing classes and just bum rush through the story fights. And B, you can select 2 job classes and use 2 sets of skills, like having the ultimate mage by having one that masters black magic and white mage magic, or having a monk that is also a geomancer. So I should actually get into that. You can select a job and earn skills by performing an action in battle. Any action that isn't moving, you get EXP and job points that you can spend to get skills, spells, and movements. Each character can learn every job class and skill for whatever team composition you want. Pro tip, first one you're buying is the Squire skill to get double job points to power level easier. Then you're going to master the Squire for your player character, and as the player character and story characters, the starting job is unique to them and will get magic and skills unique to theirs. That is way more overpowered than any basic character you'll get in the game. The game will have you moving over areas in the world map and have you move from story point to story point, but as more points become available, more shops will open up and you can buy better equipment, which is tied to the story, so that way you can't just grind for the best equipment right at the beginning of the game. But that doesn't stop you from power leveling. So battle consists of your party on one side of the board and the enemy on the other. You move them like pieces on a chessboard and move them into striking range, or close enough to hit them with a ranged weapon or magic. The status of your party is brilliantly conveyed by the marching in place, letting you know they are fine and their health is in good standing. They'll drop to one knee if their HP ever gets too low. They will signify if they are charging an attack or spell by stopping and striking a pose. If they have a status ailment, it will either change their color or put a thought bubble over their head. If one of your party members ever drops, they will have 3 of their turns until they permanently die and turn into a crystal or drop an item. If the main party leader drops and stays dead for 3 turns, then it's game over. It's actually a pretty cool mechanic. I'm sure that was actually inspired by Dungeons & Dragons Unconscious Rule. The crystal from a drop party member or enemy will give you a full restore or a skill based on whatever job class they were, or they drop a chest and you get an item. One of the easiest way to level up in this game is to go to a random encounter fight and kill all the enemies but one. You put them in a near death state, then you go and beat each other up and everyone has either a potion or a cure, and just keep on going over and over again until all the basic skills are maxed out. Don't want to waste on potions? Find a chocobo and just keep beating it up, because they have a natural cure that they can use over and over again that also heals everyone around them, which if you corner him with your full team, he ain't going nowhere until you're ready to finish him off.
Yeah, that got a little dark.
Another thing that can be done in combat is recruiting those chocobos. After unlocking the ability, you can also breed them together to get a black one that has flight and a red one that can cast meteor. So one of my favorite things about this game is the art style. It was done by Akihiko Yoshida, who would also go on to do the art for the Bravely Default series, as well as other Final Fantasy properties. The music as well, I've listened to more than on a few occasions while playing different tabletop games, as well as for a few D&D campaigns. The music I feel like never gets too repetitive and is so memorable that you know where you are when you hear them, and I know I've caught myself humming them on more than a few occasions when I'm not playing. Okay, enough of me working this game. This game does have some problems. For instance, it's really easy to snap the game in half and run right through the story with a few easy grinding sessions. But there are some roadblocks where the lead character Ramza is off by himself from the party and he can't fight with his party member support. And because of this, there are times where if you save before going into a story mission, that can and will soft lock your game. So I would recommend multiple save files and to save before starting each story mission, for your first playthrough at least. So in case you get stuck, you can load a previous save and level up a bit to make it easier on yourself if you find yourself having problems with a certain boss. There are some extra things to do if you're playing the original run. You can get a few extra characters, like I mentioned before. There's animal hide hunting you can do for extra gil. The extra dungeon that unlocks one of the final spells of the game. There is actually a lot to do. The PSP version does have some unique features that could have made it the superior version. It adds some to up-to-date translations, as well as beautiful cutscenes, as well as 2 new job classes of the Dark Knight and the Onion Knight classes. There's the extra characters, as I have mentioned, unique to this game, and there was multiplayer support that if someone else owned the game, you could link together and do a mission together to get unique equipment, specifically locked behind multiplayer mode, or you could go head-to-head with your party members. That I'm sure would have been a good time, but a day where PlayStation doesn't make handhelds anymore. It's a shame this version never got a proper port. The version was ported to iOS and Android, but the multiplayer mode was dropped altogether. It's really a shame. When I played these games, I never had friends that I could play this with and experience properly with, and now in a day where things are even easier to play with anyone, anywhere, anytime, we see a port they just don't bother with it the same thing with like the Birth by Sleep multiplayer mode. I'm still salty about that, and it didn't even get anything for the PS3 or PS4 versions. It would have been nice. But back on topic, this game is still one of my favorites, if not in my top 5 RPGs of all time. And it's not really hard to see why. I try to make it a point to at least go back and play this game from time to time. Maybe not to completion, but just to go around, make some characters, level them up, and then stop. But if I ever go back to this game, it's usually the PS1 version just because it's easier to go back to. Maybe if this game were to ever get a remake or remastered, I'd definitely buy it again. Oh man, it's that time of year again. Although you wouldn't be able to tell here in Florida, it's fall, and it's time for some spooks and creeps and horrors. And while last year I tackled the Castlevania series of games, I do plan on going back to those. Not this year though. No. This year, I decided to take a look at some other games I've been meaning to give attention to, as well as experience and getting them off my backlog. So the next time we'll be doing some purging. Make sure you tap that subscribe button and smack that bell to know when the next video is out. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again real soon.